Today I'm going to be reading from my Minister Knights of Soul series. It's a dark fantasy series. Book 2 is called Devour. It came out in July, and so I'm going to be reading from that book. And the way as a reader, I enjoy stories, but I may go to like a bookstore and get a book, but it might be book 3 or book 5, and then I don't realize it until after I finish the book that wait a minute, there were 4 other books before that. So as a writer, I try to write books that they're in a series, but they're standalone titles, so that if you read book 2, you don't have to have read book 1 to understand what's going on in book 2. And so this story is set on Valoris, which is a nice planet in a galaxy far, far away. So they know that they're on a planet, so there's some space opera elements to that. But they use like magic realism and portals and that sort of thing. So there's not ships per se, but they use portals, kind of like a Stargate, to get to different planets and different kingdoms. And so they live on Valoris, the ice planet, and Akab is known as the Devourer. And so this story is one of redemption. I was really interested in, at the time I was writing this story, I was really interested in how do you come back from doing really horrific things? How do you, like I was thinking about people in prison, and once you come out of prison, you serve your time, but how do you shed that legacy that's attached to you in order to get a new job, in order to move on in society? You've done this wrong, but how can you redeem yourself and move forward? And so this whole story is Akab is charged, who's done really, really horrible things in her past. That's why they call her the Devourer. She's a magic weaver, and so she used her powers in her youth to make people do things they didn't want to do. She would devour their will. And she used her magic to do that, to catastrophic results. And so but now as an older person, as one who's served her time and has practiced being a better individual, she's been given a task to go to the Valoris and save it because it's in trouble. It doesn't know it's in trouble, but she's been given this prophecy, and she's the one who has to go back there and save it. And so when she goes back to Valoris, though, she has that reputation that's around her, but she also faces her former lover, who she betrayed. And so there's a lot of conflict in that regard. And so the section I'm going to read is after she has kidnapped the queen's soul and is trying to escape and has been recaptured. Where am I? Oh, the orb. An upside-down hearth and fur-trimmed leather boots made the nausea in Akab's stomach lurch forward, but being carried upside down always made her ill. She tried to right herself, but she discovered her hands and feet bound. Gagged, she groaned as it all came rushing back, the soul-snatching, her escape, her capture. The minister's knights had ambushed her. Apparently, Marion had a few secretive skills and tricks of his own. With her left shoulder in agonizing pain, no doubt from one of Zykea's daggers, she tried to break her bindings. Magic weaving required her to speak to invoke. All she managed now were gurgles and grunts. Full panic set in. She wakes. Now let's put her to permanent sleep. And upside-down Zykeia came into view with dagger in hand. In time, Marion spoke with calm resolution. Death. Marion carried her over his shoulder, giving her a view of his buttocks and boots. He'd taken the orb. Like all of them, he reeked of Daker Beast, a horrid smell of wet fur and sweat. Sharp sensations of pain shot up her back. When she lifted her neck and blinked to quell the burning in her eyes, she fell back again to the same position. Akab could hear servants making their way between the East Hall and the Great Hall's kitchens. Trading, sharing, and exchanging, they often relied upon each other, and it was only when both kitchens and the storage room had been depleted of a certain item that the servants ventured out to their quarters for goods. That had been the way it worked in most castles across the Pixis galaxy. Snow and ice melted in Akab's hair, her eyelashes, and her cloak, but the melt rode down her face. She shook off as much of the weather as she could, wiggling against her restraints and her restrainer. Be still. A warning rang through Marion's tone. Ah, he must still be angry about that surprise attack. But she complied. An eerie silence hung inside the corridor. Early in the morn, hushed, disembodied voices slipped through the windows and archways as people trickled into the castle, unaware of the importance of her situation, going about the work of morning meals. The knights had tied her hands behind her back, and despite the people, no opportunity arose to escape. So she sucked in a deep breath and stretched her arms as far as the ropes would allow. Her shoulders burned from the effort, but the bindings held. Curse Psyche for being so darn efficient. Be still, Marion's voice held threat of harm. Once she complied with his orders again, he knelt and stood her upright, planting her feet flat against the stone floor. She could move her legs, though, only a little shuffle because of the rope's short length. Where is everyone? It's almost morning meals. Beside her, Zykia removed her own cloak and shook it out. After tossing it over her shoulder, she removed her gloves and shoved them into the cloak's pockets. Beside her, with his free end, Marion snatched Akim's arm and half-dragged, half-guided her down into the room. They stopped in front of her quarters, the exact same place she'd been only a few hours prior. Neither of the knights spoke. There seemed to be some mental communication between them. Marion kept his cloak on, and Akim could hear the call of the orb. She cried out against the gag, but it only came out as a muffled noise. Speak not. Your mouth has caused enough sorrow. Zykia patted her thigh daggers with her free hand. You do understand, Devourer, that you will leave this planet and never return. Perhaps leave it in spirit form. You did exactly what you told me you wouldn't do. I ought to kill you where you stand. No, that will fall to me. Marion pulled the sword from its sheath that hung on his thigh, around his waist closest to his thigh. His face a mask of stone. When he turned to a cube, he sheathed the weapon with the casualness of habit, as servants giggled and moved their way around the corridor. Zykia had a summon streak the size of a danker beast, but so did Akim. It made for a dramatic and messy relationship. So why did Akim long for it again? How could she tell Zykia that she'd risked her own life, her re-established reputation, for the sole purpose of saving Valores, for saving her? Zykia pushed her roughly aside as she unlocked her door and walked into the room. Marion shoved Akim over to the space beside the fireplace, grunting at her as he did so. It was like he wanted to speak to her, but his anger had rendered all abilities to do so null. Where's Kala? Marion inquired to Zykia. He leaned back against the wall adjacent to the floor. Did you not tell him to meet us here? We are to take this one up to the holding cells. Well, he returned from Stocklaw, opting not to camp overnight. How he manages to be late when his room is right next door? I don't know. Zykia placed more logs into the fire. She avoided eye contact with Akim. Akim smiled against the gag as she recalled that Zykia liked logs. They acted not only as a source of heat, but also as air freshener, offering the floor scents of the potted trees. Light, airy, they cleared the air of the heaviness of closed-in spaces, dampness, and cold. Where's the orb? Zykia asked. Marion answered. Octavia has it now. She and Sarah are restoring Mama to flesh. Now I'm going to pause here and talk about what happened in the previous chapter. So in this world, or in this series, they use magic orbs to soul snatch people out of their bodies. And the first book in this series is called The Soul Cages. And so what Akim has done is she's taken an orb, a magic orb, and extracted the soul of the queen, who is Marion's mom. And they've captured her, and they've taken the orb back. And now the priestesses, Sarah and Octavia, are in the process of putting their mother's spirit back into her body. And Akab groaned. The orb! She said she realized her cloak's pocket had been emptied and all her efforts had now gone to waste. While unconscious, she'd been robbed. Thief! She shouted, but it only came out as a gargled noise. And Zycera glared, Silence! At this, the door wrenched open and in walked the younger knight in question, Kayla, his face a canvas of aggravation. Somehow, we've all ended up here. I don't know why I have to be here. It's too early in the morn. And then to Akab, why isn't she dead? And Zycera nodded as she agreed. Akab had risked everything and done all the oracle had instructed. Her life now appears to be forfeit, but she'd do whatever she had to do. She trusted the goddess. If the Supreme had cause to end her life, to snip its thread, then so be it. The doors wrenched open again and in walked Sarah. She came right up to Akab, almost the same height. She leaned in close to her face. Sarah's green eyes narrowed. Bruising and scratches marred her cheeks and the bridge of her nose. Anger seemed to waft off of her, too. And not for the first time, Akab found all the knights to be very sore losers. The princes didn't enjoy their little tussle in the queen's bedchamber, and fury burned in her eyes. Akab would have grinned if it wasn't for the gag. Those were devourer thoughts, and Akab pushed them away. She didn't really enjoy what she had done, and to negate that she'd been able to best them, something few others had been able to do, well, she did smile with pleasure. Sarah, what's up with the queen? What of the queen? And Marion came to her and gently drew her away from Akab. Yes, Octavia and I were able to restore her to flesh as she once did for you with the Baden root. Her ire at Akab seeped through each word. But you live, came still another voice as an elderly woman with tapered ears walked into the room. As does the queen. The goddess heals all. How many others would squeeze into this tiny place, Akab thought. But even as Akab watched the new arrival, the woman's old and sour face changed to that of a woman in midlife. Pointed ears arched upward to a thatch of gray, locked hair. She seemed to float across the floor as the knights parted to allow her further entry. Her countenance softened as she walked directly to Akab. A hushed reverence or fear fell over the now crowded room. This woman probably frightened most people, for she wore the markings of an Anna elder. Their purplish marks covered her hands, her face, and stood out against the darkness of her skin. The other's reluctance had nothing to do with the elder's tattoo magic along her flesh. No, the power radiated from her in such thickness Akab could touch it. She wasn't sure if people moved from the elder's path by their choice or by the sheer force of her magic. Akab had only felt that dense power one other time in her life, Manola. And unlike that fixture of evil, this woman held warmth, and despite being bound, Akab relaxed. No one summons you, Akaba, Caleb muttered, bitterness and indignation pouring from his body language. Still unimpressed with the younger prince, Akab returned her attention to the elder. So this was Octava, the source of heated debate. I am Octava, and a priestess and servant of the queen. She stood rigid and regal, with little magic Akab had remaining, flattened, suppressed since the elder's arrival. Akab gurgled a greeting. It was habit. So accustomed to speaking and having the freedom to do so, she couldn't stop from replying when the elder addressed her. As the devourer, she'd been tortured, imprisoned, and hunted, but somehow being silent hurt more than all the physical torments of her past put together. The loss of her voice meant the loss of her power. She also couldn't understand why the elder had come to her, greeted her, except to harm her. Perhaps this was how they handled judgments on Dolores. Every kingdom was different. Her markers attested to that. Remove her gag and release her, Octava gestured with a sweep of her hand. Sarah scoffed. With her arms akimbo, she shook her head. The others didn't move, but they all started talking at once. You don't command us. Caleb stepped forward, his face a mask of fury. You're a servant. Kayla, Sarah rebuked him as he jerked away. You know as well as I, we cannot allow our servant to dictate a manner such as this. This woman snatched the soul of the queen. My mama. If we do not set a firm, strong example, others may feel inclined to do the same. Those who setting forward lurk among our own disgruntled people. How do we know she isn't aligned with one of the merchants? We are all servants to fate, as written by the goddess Anna, Octavia replied, but she did not speak to him. The words had been meant for Akka. Marion took Sarah into his arms, but she shook him off. Kayla speaks true. We must present a strong front. Octavia went to Akka and released her gag. It fell in a hush to the floor. Aye, he does, Zacchaeus sat down on the rug. Fate is a belief and a concept crafted by priestesses and elders, Caleb said. It does not make policy for the throne. Sarah burnt the ropes. They fell to the ground as ash. With a dry throat, Akka coughed before she could form words. Her throat pulsated in time to the throbbing in her wrists and her ankles. It's only fate that I'm here, Akka interjected. Always the obedient one, yes, Sarah? Caleb made a frustrated noise. Obedience brings us closer to the goddess. It's she that I obeyed, Sarah answered as she came from around and stood beside Octavia. No matter, bound or not, she's no threat. Akab's a one-trick thinker, as Zacchaeus said. Akab focused her attention on Octavia and spoke. You have my gratitude. I know what I have done is inexcusable. As I tried to tell Zacchaeus before, I obeyed the goddess's binding. The oracle spoke to me, and I answered. All of the lords would be destroyed. I tried to tell her, but she wouldn't listen. Just as Lady Sarah said, I obeyed the goddess. You can't hold me responsible for not trusting your word, devourer, Zacchaeus remarked. Your reputation. No, I cannot, Akab agreed. Octavia folded her arms to her sleeves of her cloak. You speak of a vision, of a prophecy. Speak and enlighten. You're not going to believe this gobhosh. Zacchaeus rose from the floor, her face pinched in disbelief. She devours truth. The elder raised her hand and the room fell silent. Zacchaeus opened her mouth to argue, but shut it without speaking. Akab couldn't tell if the elder had quieted the room with magic or fear. The effects were the same. The antique oracle's prophecies are never good, and I have felt nothing from the goddess, not even a whisper, Sarah said to the elder. Nothing. I asked the devourer. Octavia's voice drifted soft above Sarah's words. Sarah halted in her tracks. I see. The oracle would give vision to a weaver, but not a princess, and not a priestess. Temper gets you into trouble. Pride keeps you there, Sarah. Octavia turned her attention back to Akab. I heard the goddess's voice on Saturn IV while in deep meditation in the temple. She spoke to me and showed me the destruction of the Roy family and of Valoris. I haven't been on the ice planet, but I recognized Zacchaeus. I had to get her because Akab stopped herself from saying more. She couldn't explain how she feared for her ex-lover's death and had come to save not only her but the planet, not to this crowd. Besides, Zacchaeus would probably kill her if she uttered such a thing, despite it being truth. Continue, Octavia encouraged. Akab bit her lip. That's all. Before anyone else spoke, Zacchaeus pushed by Kayla and marched up to her. And soul snatching was how you meant to stop the destruction of our kingdom. Stealing our queen. Death to prevent death. I didn't kill the queen, did I? I only snatched her soul to protect her, to keep her safe. I could heard the weakness in her tone, but it held truth. It does not matter. We cannot allow her to just leave. Marion turned away from the fire. Marion's right. She cannot be allowed to leave here without consequences. To do so is a sign of weakness and encouragement for future attacks. Zykia looked away, her face grim. But it was Marion, the leader of the Minister's Knights, who walked up to Akab. She couldn't read his expression, and his face remained stoic. Kayla and Zykia escort her to the holding cells. Octavia watched Akab with soft, blooming eyes, and she said, "They will need you, Devour." Thank you. Questions, comments? Anything?
What was the origin of the story as far as the soul catching? No, I haven't read the first book.
Oh, okay. So I'm a huge Police fan and Sting fan, and he has an album called The Soul Cages, and which I'm a very big fan of. And I started thinking one day about 12 years ago, what would that actually look like in real life? Cages for souls, and what origin would that be, and where would that come from? And Sarah, in the first book is Sarah's story. She and her sister are both trapped in the soul cages, and they're Valak, who's a businessman on Solus, a different planet, different kingdom. He kidnaps people and extracts their souls using those orbs, and he places them in holding cells. And when he's ready, he mixes them together for a substance called Solence, which he sells to warring planets soldiers. And it helps you read minds. So he's selling it to Earth at Earth 3012, and he's selling it to another kingdom, and each one can read the other's minds, but each one thinks they're getting a deal, right? Because that's how business. He's a businessman. He's selling to everybody, and so there's this huge war that's occurring, but no one knows except for Valak and the people that work for him that they're actually souls of people that he's extracting out of bodies and making into this pulpy drink, to which is being sold to other people. And so Sarah and her sister managed to get reincarnated back in the flesh and escape at the onset of the Soul Cages, which is the first book. And that story is how the Minister Knights had taken a role in the galaxy of liberating people who've been kidnapped by Valak and stopping him from what he's doing. And so the Soul Cages is all about that. About her, about that group, that ensemble group.
So someone just drinks the soul, that's it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And they're able to read minds, and it probably drives them a little crazy also, but that's not touched upon in that book because it's really Sarah's stories. But that's what happens with Valak's work. And they end up, that's what they do. And Valak is making money hand over fist, but he's also doing it on the backs of something highly unethical and illegal across the galaxy. So, yes.
And when you said they're reincarnated into bodies,
yep.
Do they have to go back into their original body, or can they go into?
They can go back into a different body if one is available. Mm-hmm. And so there's not a lot of. They put the queen back into her body because it's really important for people to see her, right? Mm-hmm. But for the people who, there's no guarantee that Sarah that you see at the onset of the Soul Cages, the body she's in was the one she had before. There's no guarantee for that. That that's the case. So, yeah.
And so would she go into another body of someone who was put into a soul cage, mm-hmm. or if someone just died, could she go into that body?
It could be any of those options, yes. Mm-hmm. So there's no for Sarah, the way she looks now may not have been the way she started life. Does that make sense? Her birth could have been very different. Body could have been
Do you have any copies of Soul Cage?
I have one. Weston, I have one copy of Soul Cage, yes? Okay, the first one? Yeah. Yeah, I have one copy, sorry. Okay. But I have lots of copies of Devour. And that's pretty much what I was going to read from because this is my latest work. Mm-hmm. But I do have a newsletter if you guys want to sign up for that. I'll give you cards. You go to my website and sign up. And I usually have, I'm right now serializing a short story that's based in this world every month. And you'll be able to go back and look at other sections. I think it's chapter 4 section. And so, there are short stories in this world. There's one in the We Are Not This anthology that Falstaff has. It's a Minister Knight short story in there. Falstaff is in the dealer's room. Yeah. You bought John's book, but they have a We Are Not This anthology there's a story in there for Minister Knights as well. So, yeah. Those are great questions. Thank you. Yep, I think we're done.